My heart shattered, not into a million pieces, but into a million tiny, razor-sharp fragments, each one twisting deeper with every beat. The message hit my phone like a punch to the gut. I'm leaving you and moving to Nice with my 27-year-old paramour, and every last cent of our shared fortune is coming with me. It was 3 a.m. in the Arabian Gulf, the unforgiving desert heat still clinging to the air even in the pre-dawn hours. My hands, slick with the day's toil on the rig, trembled slightly as I held the device. 29 years I'd poured into this life, extracting black gold from the earth, and here I was, Henri Dubois, 54 years old, watching my world crumble with a few taps on a screen. The woman who sent it, Genevieve, my wife of 2 decades, followed up with a screenshot of our joint account balance. A stark, cruel £0 where a hefty £180,000 should have resided. And then, the ultimate insult, a winking emoji, as if this grand betrayal was some playful jest. I didn't hurl my phone into the steel wall of my cramped cabin, didn't let out a primal scream that would have echoed across the vast expanse of the rig. No, I simply sat on my narrow bunk, the rhythmic thrum of the machinery a mocking lullaby, and typed, "Bien, bon chance." Then I powered down my phone, the silence a sudden, deafening roar, and headed for the communal showers. The next morning, the rig felt heavier, the air thick with an unspoken weight. My second-in-command, Serge, a stoic Breton with eyes that missed nothing, kept glancing my way. I'd skipped breakfast, a cardinal sin on the rig, and plunged straight into the day's grueling schedule. Serge knew better than to ask. Here, amidst the labyrinth of pipes and derricks, personal problems remained fiercely personal. 16 souls relied on us to keep this floating metal city safe, operational, and productive. My crumbling life was a luxury I couldn't afford to display. During our brief lunch break, I risked a peek at my email. Genevieve, ever efficient in her destruction, had already filed for divorce. Her claim that my relentless pursuit of work overseas constituted abandonment. She'd enlisted the services of Monsieur Bellamy, a Parisian lawyer notorious for his aggressive tactics in high-asset divorces. They were demanding spousal support, citing my excessive income, the gall, and then the final, condescending flourish. Her emotional support partner was now residing in our London home. I slammed my laptop shut, the metallic click echoing the finality of her words. No, I wouldn't breathe a word of this to anyone. That night, as the rig swayed gently beneath the Inkai sky, I drafted an email, not to Genevieve, but to my cousin, Gaston, a shrewd financial advisor based in Lyon. The subject line, "Activate Protocol Shadow Fall." It was our prearranged code, a contingency plan born from years of witnessing colleagues lose everything in the wake of messy separations. No explanations were needed. Within 3 minutes, his reply materialized, already on it. Do not respond to anything until you're on French soil. 2 more weeks. 2 more agonizing weeks of 12-hour shifts in the stifling heat. The oil and sweat a constant reminder of the life I was systematically losing. My crew would have understood if I'd requested emergency leave. But what purpose would it serve? To confront a ghost, a woman who had already vanished from my life? No, better to finish the job, to earn every last franc. The rig supervisor, Bernard, a man whose weathered face held the wisdom of decades at sea, stopped by my cabin that night. Everything stable. Henri? He wasn't just asking about the drilling operation. Under control. Bernard, I replied, the lie tasting like ash on my tongue. More under control than Genevieve would ever comprehend. I first met Genevieve 21 years ago, in a quaint little boulangerie in Montmartre, Paris. She was 33 then, behind the counter, her quick wit and infectious laughter brightening the morning rush. I was 35, already a decade deep into the oil industry, home between contracts and savoring the fleeting moments of Parisian life. We married 9 months later, a whirlwind romance that, at the time, felt undeniably right. I'd built a comfortable life, owned my small apartment outright thanks to a fortuitous early investment, and possessed a stable career path on international rigs. She said she admired my stability, my grounded nature. I, in turn, was captivated by her vivacity, her ability to charm anyone with a flick of her wrist and a mischievous glint in her eye. The rotation schedule was always the challenge, 2 months on, 1 month off. But the financial rewards were undeniable. In 6 months, I could earn what most people in our neighborhood made in 3 years. We agreed it was worth it. She'd manage the home front. I'd build our future. Around our 12th anniversary, the first hairline cracks appeared. Minor complaints about missed family gatherings, subtle questions about whether I truly needed to accept the contracts in Saudi Arabia, veiled comments about how her friends' husbands were always present for dinner parties. In hindsight, the warning signs were flashing neon. The year I turned 49, she stopped asking when I'd be home. The photos she once sent of her day-to-day life dwindled, then ceased entirely. Our video calls grew shorter, punctuated by awkward silences, but I dismissed it as the natural evolution of a long-distance marriage. Comfort, I told myself, was simply replacing excitement, routine, uncertainty. Last Christmas, I returned to our London home to find it entirely redecorated, without a single word of discussion. New furniture, new paint, a complete overhaul. When I inquired, she simply shrugged. I needed a change. I didn't press for clarification on the kind of change she meant. 2 months ago, I noticed a series of transfers from our joint account to one I didn't recognize. House repairs, she explained vaguely. The roof needed urgent attention. I drove past the house before leaving for this rotation. No sign of construction, but a sleek, unfamiliar silver Bentley was parked in our driveway. 4 weeks ago, she stopped answering my calls altogether, only responding with curt texts claiming to be busy with a new project. I nearly flew home then, a desperate gut instinct screaming at me. Instead, I convinced myself to trust the woman I'd shared nearly 2 decades of my life with. 3 days ago, our neighbor, Monsieur Laurent, a retired English professor with a penchant for observation, sent me a grainy photo of a moving truck parked in front of our house. "Thought you should know," was his cryptic message. I didn't reply. Sometimes the wisest course of action is to do nothing at all. Sometimes the truth simply unfurls itself. I finished my shift the day after Genevieve's text and made my way back to my cabin. The satellite phone, a lifeline to the outside world, rang. It was Gaston. "Are you sitting down, Henri?" he asked, his voice unusually grave. "Just tell me," I replied, bracing myself. He didn't sugarcoat it. "She's been planning this for at least 16 months. Regular transfers to a separate account under her maiden name. Started small, 2,500 euros here, 3,500 euros there, then much larger amounts over the past 90 days. A total of 280,000 euros moved, not just the 180,000 euros from your joint account." The cabin seemed to lurch sideways for a moment. That was significantly more than what had been in our joint savings. "There's something else," Gaston continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "She changed your beneficiary designations on the life insurance policy 8 months ago, and she took out a 50,000 euros home equity line of credit against the London house. Forged your signature on that one." I sank onto the edge of my bunk, suddenly acutely aware of the deep, resonant hum of the rig's generators beneath me. 20 years together, 2 decades of shared existence, and she had been methodically erasing me from it, piece by calculated piece, for over a year. "The man," I finally managed to croak. "Who is he?" "Antoine Gerard," Gaston supplied, his tone flat. 27, as she said. Former fitness instructor. No significant employment history in the last 3 years. 4 previous relationships with women over 45. Each ended within 18 months, usually with the woman facing financial ruin. I didn't need the pattern spelled out. "And Henri," Gaston's voice hardened, "there are credit card charges for 2 one-way tickets to Nice, dated for next Tuesday." That was just 3 days away. She hadn't merely left me. She was vanishing, attempting to disappear with everything before I even set foot on French soil. I hung up the phone and sat in the suffocating darkness of my cabin for a long, indeterminate time. I didn't bother with the lights, just sat there, watching memories rearrange themselves in my mind like disjointed puzzle pieces falling into a grotesque new picture. The hushed late-night phone calls she'd take outside, the sudden, fervent interest in fitness 3 years ago, the subtle complaints about money despite our comfortable savings. What struck me hardest wasn't the betrayal, not even the financial devastation. It was the planning, the cold, calculated, patient dismantling of our life while she smiled to my face, while she accepted the money I sent home, while she told me she missed me. Something within me shifted. The raw, searing hurt crystallized into something harder, colder, infinitely more dangerous. I rose and walked to my locker, pulling out my laptop. I accessed the email account only Gaston and I knew about, a clandestine digital haven. Then I logged into the holding company we'd established 10 years ago, after watching a good friend lose everything in a particularly bitter divorce. Montaigne Holdings, named after my grandmother's village, a place of quiet strength. The account balance loaded 2.1 million euros. For a decade, I'd been diverting 70% of my income there, legally declared on my taxes, but meticulously separated from our marital assets through the corporate structure Gaston had designed. I sent a single email to my lawyer in Lyon, Maître Dubois, proceed with Operation Northern Wind. Then I closed my laptop and walked to the mess hall for coffee. For the first time in days, I felt a gnawing hunger. I landed in Lyon 38 hours after my rotation ended. The familiar chill of a French spring day, a stark contrast to the desert heat I'd left behind. Gaston met me at the airport, a burner phone and a thick folder of documents already in hand. "She's been calling your regular number non-stop since yesterday," he said, his voice low. As we navigated the bustling terminal, the bank froze the account she transferred the money to. Standard procedure for large, unusual movements. "They're requesting you come in person to verify." "She doesn't know I'm back," I stated, a grim satisfaction curling in my gut. "No one does, except you and Maître Dubois." "And that's not even the most interesting development," Gaston replied, pulling out his tablet. He showed me a series of text messages, exchanges between Genevieve and someone saved simply as A. I skimmed through them, a chilling tableau of their clandestine plans for a new life, their cruel jokes about me toiling overseas while they squandered my earnings, the detailed discussions about the house they'd already put a deposit on in Nice. But one exchange, dated just 2 days prior, snagged my attention. Genevieve. "Bank froze the money. Need Henri to verify in person. What do we do? A. He's still on the rig for 10 more days. Tell him there's an emergency with your aunt. Get him to authorize you to handle it. You're still his wife." Genevieve. "He's not answering my calls." A. "Try harder. We need that money before the house closing next week, or we look at Plan B." Genevieve. "I'm not comfortable with Plan B, A. It's just insurance money. He works a dangerous job for a reason. People have accidents all the time." I handed the tablet back to Gaston, my hands steady despite the surge of ice through my veins. "These are admissible?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "They're from the cloud backup of her phone," he confirmed. "She used your iCloud credentials to set up her new phone last year. Never changed the password. Everything syncs to your cloud storage." We drove directly to Maître Dubois' office. He was already prepared, a stack of divorce papers, a criminal complaint for the forgery on the home equity loan, and an emergency motion to freeze all assets laid out on his polished mahogany desk. "There's a complication," Maître Dubois said, once we were seated. "She filed a domestic violence claim against you yesterday. Claims she left due to ongoing emotional abuse and financial control. Said she was in fear for her safety." "That's absurd," I scoffed. "I've been 10,000 kilometers away for the past 7 weeks." "Doesn't matter," he replied, his expression grave. It's a tactic to gain sympathy with the judge and justify taking the money. Her lawyer's pushing for an emergency hearing tomorrow to get a restraining order against you and exclusive use of the house. So she wants to ban me from my own property while her paramour lives there, I asked, incredulous. Maître Dubois nodded. And there's more. The home equity loan she took out, she already spent it. Transferred it to an LLC registered to Antoine Girard 3 days after receiving it. I took a deep, fortifying breath. Options. We counterfile immediately, Maître Dubois declared, his voice firm. Fraud, forgery, alienation of affection, criminal conspiracy based on those text messages. We request an emergency freeze on all her accounts and the LLC. He slid a document across the desk. And we file this. I looked down at the paper. Motion to dismiss domestic violence claim with evidence of perjury. What evidence? I asked, a flicker of hope igniting within me. Maître Dubois offered a thin smile. Your location data from your company security badge shows you've been on that oil platform for 7 continuous weeks. Your passport entry and exit stamps confirm it, and I've subpoenaed your phone records showing all calls between you two for the past year. Nothing suggesting arguments or threats. I signed where indicated, a profound sense of vindication washing over me. One more thing, Maître Dubois added. We need you to appear surprised when she's served. She can't know you're back yet. For now, you're still officially at sea. I nodded. I can do that. As I left Maître Dubois' office, my regular phone buzzed with a text from Genevieve. Please call me. It's an emergency. I need you. I didn't respond. The trap was set, but not by her. I stayed at Gaston's flat that night, sleeping better than I had in weeks. The next morning, I logged into the security camera feed for our London house, a system I'd installed 3 years ago and maintained remotely. Genevieve had either forgotten about it or assumed I couldn't access it from overseas. The footage showed Antoine Girard lounging by the pool, our pool, sipping from my collection of single malt scotch and wearing what looked suspiciously like my old university sweatshirt. He was on my phone with someone, laughing, his feet propped up on the outdoor furniture I'd built by hand. As I watched, Genevieve came into frame. She looked anxious, pacing as she talked. I couldn't hear the audio, but her body language was clear. Things weren't going according to plan. Gaston entered with coffee. You should see this, he said, opening his laptop. He'd spent the night diving deeper into Antoine Girard's background. What he found changed everything. He's done this before, 3 times. Gaston turned the screen toward me. Each time, the same pattern. Meets a woman, usually married, always financially stable. A relationship develops. The woman leaves her husband, taking whatever money she can. They move away together. Within 18 months, he disappears with whatever's left. The screen displayed news articles, court records, social media posts. 3 women across 5 years, all left financially ruined. One was still paying off credit card debt Antoine had accumulated in her name. There's more, Gaston said quietly, his voice tinged with a grim revelation. He was briefly a person of interest in the death of his second girlfriend's ex-husband. A suspicious car accident 6 weeks after the divorce filing. The man went off a cliff on a road he'd driven for 20 years. No charges were ever filed, but the implications hung in the air between us, heavy and cold. My phone rang. Genevieve again, on my regular number. I let it go to voicemail. You should hear this, Gaston said, playing the message on speaker. Henri, please, I need you to call the bank. Her voice cracked with what sounded like genuine tears. There's been a misunderstanding with our account. I was just moving money to a safer investment, like we talked about, but the bank froze everything. I can't access any funds. Please call them and tell them it's okay. I'm really scared. We talked about no such thing. The performance was convincing. I'd have believed her 2 weeks ago. She's desperate, Maître Dubois said when we met him for lunch. The house closing in Nice is in 5 days. They need that money. What's our next move? I asked, my resolve hardening. The emergency hearing is this afternoon. Judge Delacroix is presiding. She has zero tolerance for false domestic violence claims. We have your documented alibi ready, and the bank funds we've filed to have them returned to you exclusively. But there's something else you should know. Maître Dubois slid a folder across the table. Your neighbor, Monsieur Laurent, sent these to my office this morning. Inside were photos of furniture being loaded into a moving truck. My furniture, family heirlooms, things that had been in my family for generations. They're clearing out the house, Maître Dubois confirmed, planning to disappear whether they get the bank money or not. I closed the folder and handed it back. Change of plans. Both men looked at me expectantly. I want to go home. That's not advisable before, Maître Dubois began. Not to confront them, I clarified. To watch from Monsieur Laurent's place. I want to see this with my own eyes. Gaston and Maître Dubois exchanged a look. And I want to be there when they're served, not hiding behind legal papers. I want Genevieve to see my face when her world collapses. Maître Dubois nodded slowly. I'll arrange it. As we left the restaurant, a text came through on my burner phone. It was from Monsieur Laurent. They're packing your grandfather's desk now, the one you restored. Thought you'd want to know. Some thefts go beyond money. Some betrayals cut deeper than others. This had just become personal in an entirely new way. The 6-hour drive to London gave me time to think. Maître Dubois arranged for the constabulary to serve the papers at 9 and the next morning. Gaston set up surveillance from Monsieur Laurent's house across the street, where I'd stay overnight. Everything was in place. Monsieur Laurent greeted me with a silent handshake when I arrived just after midnight. He was a retired naval engineer who'd worked offshore himself for 30 years. No explanations were needed. She has no idea you're watching? I asked once we were inside. None, he confirmed. They've been busy packing all day, loading the good stuff, leaving the rest. He pointed to his front window, which offered a clear view of my driveway. 2 moving trucks came and went, bigger ones coming tomorrow morning for the last load. I nodded, processing the information. Anyone else been by? Some woman with a clipboard yesterday, he mused. Looked like a real estate agent. That was unexpected. They're selling the house. Listing it, looks like. Saw her taking pictures. I called Maître Dubois, who promised to check property records first thing in the morning. At 3 a.m., unable to sleep, I sat at Monsieur Laurent's kitchen table, reviewing the documentation Gaston had prepared. Bank records showing Genevieve's systematic draining of our accounts. Phone records revealing hours of calls to Antoine going back over a year. Credit card statements showing hotel charges in our own town on days she claimed to be visiting her sister. There was a cold, stark clarity in seeing the evidence laid out. Not just a momentary lapse, but a calculated extraction, a deliberate dismantling of everything we'd built, piece by insidious piece. By sunrise, Maître Dubois had texted confirmation. Genevieve had listed our house with a real estate agency 2 days earlier. The asking price was 30% below market value, clearly priced for a quick sale. She'd forged my signature on the listing agreement. At 8:30 I watched from Monsieur Laurent's kitchen window as Genevieve and Antoine loaded the last, easily transportable items into Antoine's silver Bentley. Small valuables, things that could vanish without a trace. My grandmother's silver picture frames, the antique watch my father had given me before he died. At 8:45 a.m., a large moving truck pulled up. 3 men emerged and approached the house, right on schedule. At 8:55 a.m., an unmarked car parked directly behind the moving truck, effectively blocking it in. 2 constabulary officers and a woman in a business suit emerged. Maître Dubois had sent a court officer along with them. "It's time," I said to Monsieur Laurent. I walked across the street as the officers approached my front door. Genevieve answered, her expression shifting from irritation to confusion as the officers identified themselves. "Madame Dubois, we have paperwork to serve you and the gentleman on the premises." I stayed just out of sight, watching from the edge of the driveway as the color drained from her face. She called for Antoine, who appeared behind her, his arms sliding possessively around her waist. That's when I stepped into view. The look on Genevieve's face was one I'll never forget. Shock giving way to fear, then a desperate, fleeting calculation. Antoine just looked utterly bewildered. "Henri," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You're supposed to be on the rig." "Surprise," I said quietly, nodding to the officers to proceed. They handed over the stack of documents, an emergency restraining order against them, freezing of all assets, a criminal complaint for forgery, nullification of the home listing, and notice of divorce proceedings, citing fraud and criminal conspiracy. "You can't do this," Antoine blustered, puffing out his chest. "She's afraid of you. We have a domestic violence claim." "Dismissed this morning by Judge Delacroix," I interrupted, my voice calm, yet edged with steel. "Hard to abuse someone from 10,000 kilometers away. The judge was particularly interested in the text messages discussing your Plan B involving my insurance policy." His face went slack. Genevieve stepped forward, tears already forming, a practiced performance. "Henri, this is all a misunderstanding. I was just saving our documents," I finished for her, gesturing to the moving truck. "Protecting our assets by emptying our house, planning our future by selling our home without telling me." She had no answer for that. "You have 30 minutes to remove personal items only," the court officer stated, her voice authoritative. "Clothing and toiletries. Everything else stays pending court inventory." As they went inside under supervision, I turned to walk away. "Where are you going?" Genevieve called after me, her voice laced with desperation. I didn't look back. Home. The hearing took place 3 weeks later. I sat at one table with Maître Dubois, Genevieve and her lawyer at another. Antoine was conspicuously absent. He'd vanished 2 days after being served, taking Genevieve's remaining cash and jewelry with him. A familiar pattern, just as Gaston had discovered. The judge, her face a mask of impartial scrutiny, reviewed the evidence methodically. Bank records, forged documents, text messages, location data from my rig badge. When she reached the messages discussing Plan B and insurance money, she paused, setting the papers down, and looked directly at Genevieve. "Madame Dubois, are you aware of the penalties for conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, or worse?" Genevieve's lawyer whispered urgently in her ear. "It wasn't like that, Your Honor," Genevieve stammered, tears welling. "Antoine was just joking. I never would have." "Save it for the criminal proceedings, Madame Dubois," the judge interrupted, her voice sharp. "This court's jurisdiction is the division of assets and dissolution of marriage." She continued reading through the documents, occasionally shaking her head in a slow, almost imperceptible motion. When she finished, she set the papers down and removed her spectacles, placing them carefully on the bench. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've rarely seen such a clear case of premeditated financial deception within a marriage," she stated, her gaze fixed on Genevieve. "You systematically drained joint accounts while forging documents and planning to flee the country with marital assets." Turning to me, her expression softened slightly. "Monsieur Dubois, while your creation of separate accounts through a holding company might seem questionable to some, the court finds that you consistently paid household expenses, filed proper taxes, and made no attempt to hide assets from the government only to protect them from potential future claims." Her ruling was swift and final. All assets transferred by Genevieve were to be returned to me. The London house remained solely my property. Genevieve's claims for spousal support were denied, and most satisfyingly, she referred the forgery and conspiracy evidence to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges. As we left the courtroom, Genevieve tried to approach me, her face pale and drawn. I just kept walking, Some victories need no words. 6 months later, I stood on the porch of my renovated cottage in the rolling hills of Normandy. The property had been part of Montaigne Holdings all along. 20 hectares of apple orchards and meadowland I'd quietly acquired 5 years earlier as a tranquil retirement plan. Genevieve had never known it existed. The forgery charges against her had been reduced in a plea deal. No jail time, but 5 years of probation and restitution payments she'd likely never complete. Last I heard, she was living with her sister in Marseille, working in a small boutique. Antoine, true to form, had moved on to a recently divorced doctor in Bordeaux, his predatory pattern continuing unbroken. I'd taken an early retirement from the oil company. 29 years was enough. Between my investments, savings, and the modest vineyard royalties from a property in Provence, I had more than enough to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Monsieur Laurent called occasionally with updates from London. I'd sold the house there. Too many memories, none of them good anymore. He'd helped clear out the last of my things, shipping the family heirlooms to Normandy and donating the rest. The afternoon mail brought an envelope from Gaston. Final paperwork showing the dissolution of Montaigne Holdings. Its purpose was complete. Assets transferred, taxes paid, a chapter closed. As the sun began its slow descent behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I poured a glass of crisp cider from my own orchard and sat on the porch swing I'd built that summer. For the first time in years, no one was expecting anything from me. No crew waiting for instructions. No wife pretending to miss me. Just the quiet hum of nature and the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze. My phone chimed. A new project manager at a Norwegian energy company offering a consulting position. Good money, minimal travel, just sharing the expertise I'd accumulated over decades. "I'll think about it," I told him, a faint smile playing on my lips. And I would, but not tonight. Tonight was just for me, for the profound peace I'd earned, for the life I was finally living on my own terms,